After 17 years, I think we both know this isn't working anymore. Dad, what are you saying? Dad, I'm saying I want out, Margot. I've been saying it in every way except with words for 2 years now. And you haven't wanted to hear it. The night Connor Hale told his wife he was leaving, he was already packed. One suitcase by the bedroom door. Neat, considered, the kind of packing that takes more than one evening. Margot Hale did not throw anything. She did not raise her voice. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom they had shared for 14 years and looked at the suitcase, and then at the man she had married at 26 in a garden full of white hydrangeas. And she said very quietly, "Who is she?" He at least had the decency not to lie. Her name was Brooke Callister, 31 years old. She worked in Connor's architecture firm, in the department he had built from nothing, using the salary that Margot had quietly subsidized for 3 years while his business found its footing. She had the kind of effortless confidence that comes from never having had to hold anything together alone. Margot was 43. She had spent the last 6 years running the household, raising their daughter Wren, managing Connor's calendar when he was overwhelmed, and working part-time at the local library in Aldencroft, a small town outside of Raleigh, where everyone knew everyone, and the news of a separation traveled faster than weather. She had not finished her own degree. She had paused it, just temporarily, she had told herself, just until Connor's firm stabilized. 17 years later, the pause had become a permanent stop she had never quite acknowledged. She signed the papers on a Wednesday in November. She did not cry in the attorney's office. She thanked the paralegal by name, drove home, made Wren's favorite dinner, and sat across the table from her 15-year-old daughter, who had her grandmother's eyes and the particular stillness of a child who understands more than she is supposed to. "Is Dad coming home for dinner?" Wren asked. "No, sweetheart," Margot said. "Not tonight, not anymore." Wren put down her fork. She reached across the table and covered her mother's hand with both of hers. Neither of them said anything else. They did not need to. The kitchen was very quiet, and outside the first frost of November was settling on the grass, and Margot thought, somewhere beneath the ache, that she had no idea what came next. Only that something did. Her mother had died 4 years earlier. Her father, Leonard Voss, had followed 18 months after that, the way long-married people sometimes do, quietly and without much fuss, as if he had simply decided there was no good reason to stay once she was gone. He had been a soft-spoken man who repaired antique clocks in a small workshop behind their house in Hendersonville and spent his weekends at estate auctions, buying things nobody else thought were worth buying. He wore the same gray flannel jacket every autumn. He drove a truck that was older than Margot's marriage. He said very little and meant everything he did say. When he died, he left Margot a sealed envelope with her name written in his careful block letters on the front. Inside, a single handwritten note. "When you're ready, call a woman named Sylvia Marsh in Asheville. Tell her who you are. She will handle the rest." Margot had tucked the envelope into the box where she kept things she was not ready to think about. Her mother's recipe cards, Wren's first pair of shoes, a photo of herself at 22, with a backpack and an unfinished expression, and she had not thought about it again, until the morning after she signed the divorce papers. She went looking for something else entirely, and found the envelope instead. She called the number. Sylvia Marsh was 72 years old, brisk and warm in equal measure, the kind of woman who gets directly to the point because she respects your time. She did not ask Margot to come to her office. She drove 2 hours to Aldencroft and arrived at Margot's door with a leather portfolio and a thermos of coffee and the expression of someone who has been waiting to deliver news for a very long time and is relieved to finally be doing it. They sat in Margot's kitchen, the same table where Margot had signed the divorce papers less than 24 hours before. Sylvia opened the portfolio and told her everything. Leonard Voss had not only been a clock repairman. Over 35 years, quietly and without a single word to anyone, he had built a private holding company called Voss & Associates, a portfolio of commercial real estate across 4 states, 2 manufacturing facilities he had purchased in the 90s when nobody wanted them, and a long-term investment fund that had compounded steadily and without drama for decades. He had used the income to fund rural literacy programs, after-school workshops, a scholarship fund for first-generation college students in Western North Carolina, 3 women's shelters he endowed anonymously, and a public library renovation in every county where his own father had once worked the land. He had never told Margot any of it, not because he was hiding it from her, Sylvia said gently, because he was building it for her. He had told Sylvia that Margot was the only person he had ever known who could be trusted with something this quiet, this purposeful, this unbothered by recognition. He had wanted to wait until she needed it most. "How much?" Margot asked. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Sylvia turned a page in the portfolio. "Conservatively valued," she said. "The total estate is $2.7 billion. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, Wren's school bus went past the window. Margot looked down at her own hands, the hands that had shelved books at the Aldencroft Public Library, packed lunches, signed paperwork, folded laundry, let go of one dream after another so quietly that she had stopped noticing it was happening. These same hands, she did not cry. She sat very still for a long moment, and then she said, "He knew, didn't he? He knew this was coming." Sylvia looked at her with something that was not quite a smile, but was close to it. "He told me once," she said, "that the right time would find you. He was very patient about it." Margot told no one. Not Wren, not yet. Not her friend Dana, who loved her genuinely and without condition but could not keep a secret past Tuesday. Not her sister-in-law Priya, who was loyal but married to a man who lunched with Connor's business partners. She hired a legal team in Raleigh she had never met, people with no connection to Connor or his firm, and spent 3 weeks in careful meetings learning the scope of what her father had built. She read every document, she asked every question. She took notes in the same green notebook she used for her library work. Then she did something she had not done in 17 years. She decided what she wanted. She kept the house in Aldencroft. She planted a kitchen garden in the spring. She drove to Asheville one Saturday and enrolled, quietly, in the graduate program in library science she had deferred before Wren was born. She told the admissions coordinator she was 43 and had been out of school for 20 years and asked if that was a problem. The coordinator said they welcomed it. Margot said good and paid the deposit herself. It was through the foundation's work, specifically a new branch library project in a small mountain community called Crestfall, that she met a man named Daniel Ashby. Daniel was 47, tall without being imposing, with the particular stillness of someone who has spent a lot of time in rooms where careful listening matters. He was an urban planner by training, but for the past 15 years, he had worked almost exclusively with rural communities designing public spaces that functioned, that people actually used, that were built to last rather than to be photographed. He had won no major awards. He had never been profiled in a magazine. His work was in the walls of places that needed walls, and he seemed entirely satisfied with this. He came to Aldencroft on a Thursday morning in late March to walk the proposed site with the foundation's project coordinator. Margot was there because she was the foundation's unnamed director, though almost no one knew that yet. She was also there because she had strong opinions about where the children's section should face and was not prepared to keep them to herself. He was measuring the southeast corner of the lot when she arrived and told him, without preamble, that the light would be wrong there in the afternoon. He looked up. He looked at the lot. He looked at the sky. He looked back at the lot. "You're right," he said. She had not expected that. She had expected debate. She had prepared for it. They spent the next 2 hours walking the site together. He asked good questions. He listened to the answers, actually listened, the way people do when they intend to use what you say, rather than just wait for their turn to speak. She disagreed with him on 3 points. He disagreed with her on 2. Every single disagreement produced something better than either of them had started with. By noon, they were eating sandwiches on the tailgate of his truck, still talking. "You're not from the foundation originally," he said. It was not quite a question. "No," she said. And then, because she was tired of saying less than she meant, "I'm the director. I just haven't announced it yet." He looked at her. "Why not? I'm still deciding who I want to be in the room," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "That's a careful answer for an honest question." "I know," she said. "I'm working on it." He laughed. It was a short, genuine sound, surprised out of him. She liked having caused it. He came back to the site twice the following week. He came back the week after that for a reason that had less to do with the site and more to do with the fact that she was there. She noticed this but said nothing about it. She was out of practice at being noticed, and was not entirely sure what to do with the feeling, which was something like warmth and something like alarm, and beneath both of those, something that felt very much like being awake. One evening in April, she was on the library steps reviewing the site plans when he pulled up and parked, and walked over with 2 cups of coffee and held one out without asking if she wanted it. "I was passing by," he said. "You drove 20 minutes out of your way," she said. "Yes," he said. He sat down on the steps beside her. They drank the coffee and talked about nothing important, and then talked about things that were. He had been divorced for 8 years. He had a son, Miles, 22, who was studying environmental law in Vermont and called every Sunday. He had moved to this part of the state because a community needed the work, and because, he said simply, he had been ready for something quieter. "What does quiet feel like?" Margot asked. He thought about it. "Like being able to hear yourself think," he said, "like not performing." She looked at the library door. She had worked in this building for 6 years. She had shelved books and helped children find stories and recommended novels to people, going through things they could not name. She had done all of it with a kind of careful competence that left very little room for anything else. She had mistaken the competence for contentment for longer than she liked to admit. "I know something about performing," she said quietly. He looked at her. He did not say anything. He just waited the way you wait when you want someone to know they don't have to stop there if they don't want to. She did not stop there. She told him about the library, about the 17 years, about the pause that became permanent. She did not tell him about the money yet. She told him about Wren, about the frost on the grass the night she had signed the papers, about the envelope in the box with the recipe cards. She told him about her father and the gray flannel jacket and the old truck and the estate auctions, and she watched Daniel's face as she said it, and he was not trying to solve anything. He was just there, completely, quietly, unhurriedly there. When she finished, he said, "He sounds like someone who knew exactly how to love a person without making it about himself." She pressed her lips together for a moment. "Yes," she said, "he was." They sat until the light was gone from the sky. When she finally stood to go, he stood too. He looked at her in the amber glow of the library's outside lamp. "I'd like to have dinner with you," he said. "Not a working dinner, just dinner." She thought about what it felt like to want something for herself. It was an unfamiliar sensation, like a muscle used for the first time in a long time, tender and real. "Friday," she said, 7 o'clock. He nodded. He walked back to his truck in the dark and drove away. She stood on the library steps a moment longer, her hand pressed flat against the old brick building, feeling something move through her that she did not have an immediate name for, and decided she did not need one yet. Friday came. He arrived exactly on time in a dark jacket and brought her a small bunch of freesias, yellow and white, loose and unpretentious. "Not roses," she said. "You told me you replanted your entire front garden last fall," he said. "No roses." She looked at him. "I mentioned that once." "You mentioned it once," he said. She took the freesias inside and put them in a jar on the kitchen table and felt something catch in her chest. The way it does when you realize someone has been paying attention in the particular way that has nothing to do with remembering facts and everything to do with caring about the person who said them. Wren came downstairs as they were leaving, looked at Daniel with the clear-eyed assessment of a teenager who loves her mother and is protective about it, and said, "Are you going to be back late?" "Not too late," Margot said. Wren looked at Daniel. "She likes tea when she gets home, not coffee." "Tea," Wren, Margot said. "Noted," Daniel said, entirely serious. Wren went back upstairs. Margot closed her eyes briefly. Daniel held the front door open and she saw that he was smiling, the quiet kind that lives in the eyes more than the mouth. They went to a small restaurant 40 minutes from Aldencroft, a place with low lighting and round tables, and the kind of unhurried service that suggests no one is being rushed anywhere. They talked for 3 hours, about her father's estate auctions and what he had been looking for when he bought the things nobody wanted, about Daniel's son Miles and the particular pride of watching a child become someone you genuinely admire. About what a library is actually for, which is not books, Margot said, but the right for anyone to walk in off the street and have access to the same knowledge as everyone else. He leaned forward when she said this and said, "That's exactly what a park is for," and they were off again for another hour. He drove her home. They stood on the porch in the spring air, the North Carolina night soft around them, the new garden coming up in dark shapes along the path. He turned to her. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair gently behind her ear, his hand resting for just a moment at her jaw, warm and still. "Margot," he said, just her name. She looked at him. She did not look away. He kissed her slowly, with nothing hurried in it at all. The kind of kiss that is not trying to prove anything. She had forgotten that a kiss could feel like an arrival rather than a performance. Like being somewhere you have been heading toward for a very long time without knowing it. When he pulled back, she kept her eyes closed for one more second. Then she opened them and he was watching her with an expression she recognized from the sight, from the library steps, from the conversation about her father. The expression of someone fully and quietly paying attention. "Good night, Margot," he said. "Good night, Daniel," she said. She went inside, leaned against the closed door in the dark hallway, and listened to her own heartbeat for a long time. In the background, something large was being prepared. Sylvia Marsh had come to Margot 3 months after their first meeting with a proposal. Voss and Associates had quietly been a significant investor and landowner across much of western and central North Carolina for decades. Many of the businesses, institutions, and development projects in the region had drawn on the foundation's capital without knowing who stood behind it. There was a regional conference coming, the kind that drew developers, civic leaders, landowners, financial institutions, architectural firms, and municipal planners from across 4 states. The foundation had been a sponsor for 11 consecutive years. "No one in that room knows who runs this," Sylvia said. "They know Voss and Associates. They know the foundation's work. They do not know you. And I think," she said, folding her hands with the calm certainty of a woman who has been right many times before, "it is time they did." Margot read the guest list 3 days later. Connor Hale's firm was on it. Connor had accepted the invitation. He was bringing 2 junior partners and, apparently, a guest. Brooke Callister's name was listed beside his. Margot set the list on her desk. She looked out the window at the kitchen garden, where the first tomatoes were beginning. She picked up her pen. She went to find a dress. The conference was held at the Carrington in downtown Charlotte, a grand old hotel with high ceilings and chandeliers that had been there long enough to have watched a great deal of history pass beneath them. Ballroom, 240 guests, a dinner service, a program, a formal announcement segment in the second half of the evening. Connor arrived in the kind of suit that announces itself. He moved through the room the way he always had, hand extended, name remembered, drink in hand, comfort in public spaces that he had worn so long he had mistaken it for substance. Brooke was beside him in a red dress, her hand through his arm, already scanning the room for people worth knowing. He found a good table near the front. He ordered a scotch. The evening was going exactly as he had expected it to go. Sylvia Marsh took the podium at 8:15. The room settled. "Before we move to the evening's program," she said, in the measured voice of someone who has spent decades understanding that the most important things do not need to be rushed, "I want to tell you about a man most of you never had the chance to meet." Connor swirled his drink. Leonard Voss, she began, was a clock repairman from Hendersonville, North Carolina. He drove a truck from 1987. He attended estate auctions on the weekends. He wore the same gray flannel jacket every autumn for 22 years. He was not interested in recognition. He was not interested in having his name on anything. Over 35 years, quietly and without a single press mention, Leonard Voss built one of the most significant private holding companies in the American South. He used it year after year to fund literacy programs, women's shelters, rural infrastructure, first-generation scholarships, and public libraries in communities that had been waiting a long time for someone to remember they existed. He was the most purposeful man I ever had the privilege of knowing. He died 4 years ago. The room was completely still, 240 people not moving. Everything he built passed to his only child, She has been the active director of Voss and Associates and the Voss Foundation for the past 18 months. Her net worth stands at $2.7 billion. She is one of the steadiest and most quietly determined people I have ever known. Her father raised her to believe that the work matters and the credit doesn't. She has lived that principle every single day. A movement through the crowd. The soft electric sound of a room recalibrating. He looked toward the back of the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Miss Margot Voss. The doors opened. She walked in. She wore a deep emerald gown, structured at the shoulder, clean at the neck, catching the chandelier light in a way that was not designed for attention but commanded it anyway. Her hair was up. Her posture was her own. She did not walk like someone auditioning for a room. She walked like someone who had finally remembered that she did not have to. The applause began before she reached the center of the room. That instinctive kind that does not wait to be organized. Connor Hale set his drink down. The color left his face as though it had been called away suddenly. He was looking at the woman he had told was stuck. The woman he had handed divorce papers to across a kitchen table and called finished. Walking across the floor of a 400-person ballroom as though the ground beneath her had always been hers. Because it was. Do you know her? Brooks said. He did not answer. Margot spoke for 12 minutes. She talked about her father's vision, about the foundation's work, about what she intended to build next. She was not nervous. She was not performing. She was simply, for the first time in a very long time, completely herself in a room full of people, and the room felt it. When she finished, the 240 people in the Carrington ballroom rose to their feet. Connor moved through the crowd. He left Brooke without a word, without a glance, and pushed through the room until he reached the edge of the stage where Margot was speaking with two civic leaders. Margot, she turned. His face was completely undone. The composure he had built and maintained across 2 decades of business rooms was simply gone. He looked at her the way a man looks when the full price of a choice arrives all at once, and he discovers it is higher than he thought anything could be. How, he said. His voice was rough. How did I not know? How did I share 17 years with you and not know who you were? She looked at him, not cold, not sharp. Simply clear, the way things are clear when you have finally stopped making room for confusion. You didn't ask, Connor, she said. You never asked. I was wrong. The words came out stripped of everything, about you, about what I had, about what mattered. He reached for her hand. Margot, I am, Connor. Her voice was gentle, the way a door is gentle when it closes properly. He stopped. I forgive you, she said, and she meant it. It had not been easy to mean it, but she meant it entirely. But forgiveness is not the same as going back. And I am not going back. She held his gaze for one steady moment. Around them, the room was beginning to take notice. She did not lower her voice. She did not owe him a smaller moment. I hope you find your way, she said. I genuinely do. She turned. Daniel Ashby had been watching from across the room. He had been invited as the lead planner on the Crestfall project, one of the Foundation's largest current undertakings, and he had known tonight was important to Margot without knowing exactly how large important was until the doors had opened and 240 people had risen to their feet. He made his way toward her now, unhurried and certain. Dark jacket. The quiet energy of someone who does not need the room to confirm anything for him. He touched her elbow. She turned, and something in her face shifted in the simple way it does when the right person arrives. You were extraordinary, he said. Thank you, Daniel, she said. He offered his hand. I believe I owe you a dance. She looked at the floor where the quartet had begun something slow and sweeping. I should tell you, she said, that I took ballroom lessons for 8 years. I should tell you, he said, that I have absolutely no idea what I am doing. She laughed, the full, free kind that had not been a regular feature of her life for a very long time, and was now simply, completely back. Then follow my lead, she said. She took his hand and they moved onto the floor. She danced with the ease of someone whose body remembers what her mind had partially forgotten. He was not trained, but he was present, holding her with the confidence of a man who may not know the steps, but has no uncertainty at all about the person in his arms. They found their rhythm quickly, the kind of rhythm that looks easy from the outside, because the two people inside it are actually listening to each other. At one point, he said something low near her ear that made her laugh and tip her head back, and he pulled her slightly closer when she did, and the people nearby felt it the way you feel it when something real is happening in a room full of people performing. Connor stood at the edge of the dance floor. He watched Daniel look at Margot the way he himself had not looked at anyone in years. With his whole attention, without reservation, without anywhere else to be. He understood, standing there, with a completeness that went below thought, exactly what he had thrown away. Not the money, not the 2.7 billion that had been living quietly inside the woman he had told was stuck. Her, just her. The woman who knew what a library was actually for, and had an opinion about where the afternoon light fell and had held his household together for 17 years without ever once asking to be thanked for it. He had looked straight at her for 17 years and never once actually seen her. He left early. Brooke followed him out through the lobby, her heels sharp against the marble. "Connor, where are you going?" "We haven't even." He reached the car. He opened the door. "Connor," she was beside him. "You are not seriously leaving. Talk to me." He got in. He sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. Then the window came down. He looked at her. Not with love, not with guilt, with the particular clarity that arrives when a person finally stops lying to themselves. "I left a woman who loved me for 17 years, he said. "A woman who built everything I had, who paused her entire life so I could build mine and never once said the word owed. I called her stuck." He paused. "Tonight I watched her walk into a room of 240 people as a billionaire. I watched her dance with a man who sees everything I spent 17 years looking past. His jaw was tight. I left my wife of 17 years for you. And what I have is exactly what I deserve." She opened her mouth. "Don't," he said. The window went up. He drove. 2 blocks away he pulled over. He sat in the car in the dark and did not move for a long time. The city went around him entirely unbothered. He pressed his forehead against the wheel. He had done this. With clear eyes and a full understanding of what he was doing. He had done this. That was the part that would not leave him alone. She stood on the hotel steps in the warm Charlotte night, watching his taillights disappear. She stood there until they were gone entirely, her red dress entirely wrong for how cold she suddenly felt. Her arms crossed over her chest, understanding, for the first time, that she had gambled on a man who had already spent everything that mattered before she had even placed her bet. She sat down on the steps and cried, not for love, for the version of her future she had been carrying around in her hands for the past 2 years, and for the realization that it had never been real. Inside, in the Carrington ballroom, the dancing went on. Inside, Margot Voss was still dancing. 3 months later, Connor's firm lost its anchor development contract, a major mixed-use project in the Research Triangle that had depended on access to land parcels held, it turned out, by the Voss Foundation. The foundation had declined to extend the lease. Quietly, without a public statement, the project collapsed. The consortium regrouped without Connor's firm. Within 6 months he had been moved to a different department. Smaller clients, quieter rooms, nothing with his name above it. Brooke left by spring. She did not make a scene. She packed while he was at the office and left her key on the kitchen counter, and he came home to the sound of nothing, which turned out to be the loudest thing he had ever heard. He sat alone in the apartment and looked at his hands for a long time. "I did this," he said, to no one, to himself, to the silence, which agreed without saying so. In Aldencroft, a different kind of evening was happening. It was a Sunday in October, early afternoon, the kind of light that makes North Carolina hills look like they were painted by someone in a good mood. Margot was in the kitchen when Daniel came in from the garden with dirt on his jacket and a small bunch of the last dahlias of the season, slightly ragged, entirely sincere. He did not propose at a restaurant. He did not propose with an audience. He proposed on the back porch in the afternoon light with Wren's old dog asleep in the yard and the sound of the neighbor's radio coming faintly through the trees. He held out a ring, simple, gold, with a stone that caught the October light without making a production of it. "I know who I am when I'm with you," he said. "I didn't always. For a long time I was very good at being useful to people and not particularly good at anything else. With you I am better. I would like to spend the rest of my life being better." She looked at him. The dahlias were on the porch railing behind him. The dog had not moved. The neighbor's radio was playing something country and faintly heartbroken. "Yes," she said. He put the ring on her finger. He kissed her, and she closed her eyes the way she had learned to close them with him. With nothing held back, nothing performed, nothing offered as a substitute for the real thing. She called Wren in from upstairs. Wren came down, looked at the ring, looked at Daniel, and said very formally, "I have a few questions." "Wren," Margot said. "I'll take them in any order," Daniel said. Wren sat down at the kitchen table. She asked 3 questions. They were good questions. Daniel answered them seriously. At the end, Wren said, "Okay," the way a teenager says okay when they mean considerably more than okay, and then she went and hugged her mother for a long time and said, very quietly into her shoulder, "Dad was an idiot." "Wren," Margot said. "He was, Mom." Margot laughed. The real one, the free one, the one that had started coming back and showed no signs of going anywhere again. They married in January in the Crestfall Library, the one the foundation had built, the one Daniel had designed, the one that now had a children's section facing exactly the right direction for the morning light. 23 people. Freesius everywhere, yellow and white. Sylvia Marsh in the front row, wearing the kind of hat that communicates celebration. Miles had flown in from Vermont and stood beside his father with his grandfather's steady eyes and his own particular kind of stillness. Wren walked her mother down the short aisle between the reading tables and the picture books, and when Margot reached Daniel and he looked at her, Wren quickly looked at the ceiling, because some expressions are too private to witness directly, and she knew enough to know this was one of them. Sylvia Marsh wept freely and without apology. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Daniel kissed her like they had all the time in the world, which it turned out they did. They built a life that suited them. Daniel designed. Margot ran the foundation the way her father had run everything. Without press, without performance, with the entire focus on the good being done and none on the credit. A library wing in Boone. A reading room in every county her father had ever attended an auction in. Scholarships going out each year to students who would be the first in their families. Miles joined the foundation's legal team in its 2nd year and had his grandmother's handwriting and his father's way of listening. Sunday dinners every week, the kind that run long and loud and end with someone doing dishes while someone else refuses to stop talking. Wren went to college in the fall to study, of all things, architecture. She called every Sunday, the same time as Miles, and the calls often overlapped, and Margot would sit in the kitchen surrounded by both voices coming out of 2 phones at opposite ends of the table and think about her father in his gray flannel jacket buying things nobody else thought were worth buying. He had seen something in all of it, the old things, the overlooked things, the quiet things that turned out to be everything. There was a morning that November, the hills above Crestfall gold and bare, the air cold and entirely clean. When Margot stood on the library's back step with her coffee, and Daniel came and stood beside her, and they did not say anything for a while, watching the light come down over the ridge. She thought about the envelope in the box, about the kitchen table, and the pen and the papers, and the single suitcase by the bedroom door. She thought about the pause she had lived inside for 17 years, and the morning she had finally put down the pen and walked out of the office and driven home, and not known what came next. She had not known. That was the thing. She had not known, and it had turned out to be the most important thing that had ever happened to her, because not knowing had made room for everything else. "He was right, you know," she said. "Who was?" Daniel asked. She looked at the light on the ridge. "My father, he said the right time would find me." She paused. He just didn't say it would take a little while to recognize it. Daniel put his arm around her. He pressed a long, slow kiss to the side of her head. In the foundation's front garden, the dahlias had all gone to seed now, but along the back wall something unexpected. A climbing rose, planted by the previous tenant, one nobody had tended in years, had finally taken hold. It was dormant now, bare canes against the stone, but it had put down roots. You could see it in the way it held the wall, quietly, stubbornly, in exactly the direction it had decided to grow. Some people are buried by the life they were handed. Margot Voss was not that person. She just needed the clearing first. The pause that turns out not to be a pause at all. The envelope in the back of the box. The morning after the worst night that becomes, without announcing itself, the first morning of everything else. If this story found you today, you might be someone who is holding on right now. Someone who gave everything and is sitting in the quiet tonight, wondering if anything good is still out there with your name on it. It is. It does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in a sealed envelope and a wrong suitcase by a door and a frost on the grass. Sometimes the clearing has to come before you can see what was always there. Tell someone who needs to hear it. The right time is already on its way. And if this story moved something in you, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what it is right now. Hit like, subscribe, and stay close, because there are more stories coming. Stories about the people who got knocked all the way down and came back as something the world was not prepared for. You will not want to miss a single one.